Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we conclude the Legend of Seyavash as we begin with the tale of the birth of his son. On a dark, moonless night, when birds and beasts were sleeping, the Lord Piran saw in a dream a candle lit from the sun. Seyavash stood by the candle, a sword in his hand, crying out in a loud voice, "This is no time for rest. Rise from sleep. Learn from how the world moves onward. A new day dawns, and new customs come. Tonight is the birthnight of Kay Khosrow." Piran trembled in his sleep, and he woke. He roused Golshah and said, "Go to Farigis. I dreamed of Seyavash, more splendid than a sun, who said to me, 'How long will you sleep? Rise and run to the feast of Kay Khosrow, who will rule the world.'" When Golshah reached Farigis, she saw that the princess had already borne her son. She ran back lightheartedly, shouting the news to all the world, and said to Piran, "He's like the sun and the moon together. Come and see the little marvel. See what God has created in his goodness. You say he's ready for a crown, or for a helmet in battle." As soon as Piran saw the prince, he laughed and scattered coins for him, as his great stature seemed more fitting for a 1-year-old child than a newborn baby. Gazing at the child, Piran wept for Seyavash and cursed Afrasyab. To his nobles he said, "If I am killed for this, I'll say I shall not let Afrasyab get his clutches on this child, even if it throws me to the wild beasts." At the time the sun unsheathed his sword, as Afrasyab was waking up, Piran came hurrying in after the room was cleared. He approached and said, "Sun King, world conqueror, wise and versed in magic arts, another subject was added to your rule last night. He seems a capable, intelligent child, and as fair to look on as the moon. If Tur could live again, he'd long to see him, for he resembles Farigis in majesty and glory. No picture in a palace is as magnificent as this prince. In him the royal splendor is renewed. Now distant evil thoughts from your mind, mercy will become both your crown and your heart." God cleansed all hatred from the monarch's mind. He knew that Seyavash had been malaligned. He sighed for him, tortured with pain and guilt, mourning his malice and the blood he'd spilt. He said, "I've heard enough about this newcomer. Everyone talks about him. The land is full of disturbances because of him. And I remember what was told from that mingled line of Tur and Kay Khosrow. A great king would be born. The world will turn to him, and all the cities of Piran will pay him homage. But let what must come, come. There is nothing to be gained by worry and grief. Don't keep him among your courtiers. Send him off to the shepherds, and see that he doesn't know who he is or why he is there." He said whatever came into his head, thinking that this ancient world was young and malleable. Piran left the court in high spirits, giving thanks to God and praising the king. He traveled home deep in thought. Once there, he summoned shepherds from the mountains and said, "Keep this boy as dearly as your own souls. Keep him safe from wind and dust. See that he wants for nothing and he never suffers." He gave the shepherds many gifts and sent a wet nurse with them. By the time the boy was 7 years old, his lineage began to show. He fashioned a bow from a branch and strung it with gut, that he made a featherless arrow and went off to the plains to hunt. When he was 10, he was a fierce fighter and confronted bears, wild boars, and wolves. Soon, still using the same rough bow he'd made, he progressed to leopards and lions. By now, he would take no orders from the shepherds who looked after him, and so his guardian descended from the mountains and went whining to Piran. He said, "I've come to complain to your lordship about our young hero. At first he hunted deer, and he didn't look for lions or leopards. But now it makes no difference to him whether he's after a lion or a deer. God forbid any harm should come to him. I'm yours to command, my lord." Piran laughed and said, "Lineage and skill won't stay hidden long." He rode to where the young lion was living and ordered him to step forward. Seeing the boy's noble stature, he dismounted and kissed his hand. Then he gazed at him, taking in the signs of kingly glory in his face. His eyes brimmed with tears, and love filled his heart. He folded the boy in his arms and held him there for a long time, brooding in his heart on the boy's fate. He said, "O Khosrow, follower of the pure faith, may the face of the earth be bright upon you." Khosrow replied, "My lord, everyone speaks well of your kindness, and I see you're not ashamed to embrace a shepherd's son." Piran's heart was wrung at these words. He blushed and said, "My boy, you called to mind our ancient heroes. The world is yours by right, and you've been deprived of it. No shepherd is kin to you, and I could tell you much more about this." He called for horses and royal clothes for the young man, and as the two rode together back to Piran's castle, Piran grieved in his heart for Seyavash. He kept the boy by him and brought him up, and though he delighted in his company, he feared for him because of Afrasyab, and his anxiety gave him no rest. And so the heavens turned for a few years more, and Afrasyab's heart grew milder. One night, a messenger arrived summoning Piran to the king's presence. When he arrived, Afrasyab said to him, "Every night my heart is filled with thoughts of evil and sorrow. I think of that child of Seyavash's, and it's as if he has darkened all my days. How can it be right for a shepherd to bring up a descendant of Farigis? If it's fated that evil will come to me from him, my precautions won't change God's will. If he can forget about the past, let him live happily, and I will too. And if he shows any signs of evil, then he'll lose his head as his father did." Piran replied, "My lord, you need no counselor to advise you. What does a little child who's ignorant of the world know about the past? Don't trouble yourself about this matter any more. What's that saying, the teacher's stronger than the father, and a mother's love counts most of all? Now for my sake, swear me an oath, as solemn as those sworn by the ancient kings, that you won't harm the boy." Afrasyab's granite heart softened at Piran's words, and he swore a solemn royal oath. "By day's bright splendor, by the dark night, by God who made the earth and heaven's light, who's made earth's beasts and human souls, I say I shall not harm this child in any way." Piran kissed the ground and said, "Just king, without peer or equal on the earth and in the heavens, may wisdom always guide you. May time and space be the dust beneath your feet." Piran hurried back to Kay Khosrow, and his cheeks glowed with happiness. He said to Khosrow, "Drive wisdom from your heart. If he talks about battles, answer with banquets. Appear before him like a fool. Talk as an idiot talks. If you can keep clear of sense, you'll get through today safely." Then he placed the Khaenid crown on his head and buckled the Khaenid belt about his waist. He had him mounted on a high-stepping horse, and the two came to Afrasyab's court, while courts gathered to gaze with tears in their eyes, and heralds called before them, "Clear the way, a new prince approaches." When they reached the court, the grandfather's face went wet with tears of shame. Then he stared at his grandson, saying words of friendship, but revolving evil in his mind. He gazed for a while at the youth's stature and splendor. As he looked at his face, turned pale. Watching him, Piran began to tremble and despaired of Khosrow's life. The king's face seemed closed and forbidding, but then kindness entered his heart. He said, "Young man, you are new to the court. Tell me what you know about the shepherd's life. What do you do with your sheep? How do you lead them to their pastures?" Khosrow answered, "There's no hunting. I've no bow or bowstring or arrows." Then Afrasyab asked him about his teachers, the good and the evil fortune he had seen. Khosrow answered, "Where there's a leopard, the hearts of sharp-clawed men burst with fear." Thirdly, he asked him about his mother and father, about Iran, and about his food and where he slept. Khosrow answered, "A fierce dog can't bring down a ravening lion." The king laughed at his replies and turned to Piran, saying, "His mind's awry. I ask him about the head, and his answers are all about the feet. No good or evil is going to come from him. Men's intent on revenge don't behave like this. Go hand him over to his mother, and set someone trustworthy to look after them. Let them go back to Seyavash. Keep bad counsels away from him, but give him whatever he needs in the way of money, horses, slaves, and so forth." Hurrying a little, Piran hustled Kay Khosrow from Afrasyab's presence. They reached home safely, when Piran, well pleased by what had happened and convinced that the evil eye was sealed, he said, "God's justice has bestowed a new tree on the world, and now it gives its fruit." He opened wide the doors of his ancient treasury and equipped the prince with all he needed: silks, swords, jewels, horses, armor, crowns, belts, thrones, purses of coins, carpets, and cloth, and everything else he might require. Then he sent Farigis and Kay Khosrow to Seyavash, which had become a wilderness of thorns. Even the beasts of the field came to pay homage to them, and men gathered from every quarter bowed before them, saying, "From the noble tree uprooted stock, a new shoot has sprung. May the evil eye be far from our universal Lord. May Seyavash's soul be filled with light." The ground of the ruined city revived, and the weeds turned to tall cypresses. From the place where Seyavash's blood had been spilt, a green tree sprang up on its leaves. The prince's face could be seen, and its scent was like the scent of musk. It flourished in the winter's cold as freshly as in spring, and it became the place where those who mourned for Seyavash gathered together. The crone will see her infant suck and play, and while he sucks, she'll snatch her breast away. Such is the world to which our hearts are bound, before we hurried pell-mell underground. If fortune raises one above the skies, fortune will cast him down before he dies. Turn from this world's innocently vanity, and put your trust in God's eternity. When Rostam learned of Seyavash's death, he dragged Sudabeh from Kayvas's harem, and he killed her for her part in the young prince's downfall. He then attacked Piran and laid much of it waste in a war of vengeance. Afrasyab, however, escaped and lived to fight another day. The Persian hero Give was sent to Piran to find and bring Kay Khosrow and his mother Farigis to Iran. After their hazardous journey crossing the river Oxus to the Iranian side, Kay Khosrow was acclaimed by the Persian court as Kayvas's heir. Only Tus demurred, as he believed that both he and Farigis had a better right to the throne than Khosrow. Khosrow became the ruler of Iran, and his grandfather Kayvas retreated into the background. Khosrow immediately began preparations for a lengthy campaign to subjugate Piran and to bring Afrasyab to justice for his murder of Seyavash. The malcontent Tus was made commander of the Persian army and sent on a preliminary expedition against Piran. And there I end the story for today. Until tomorrow, when I bring you more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends,